But why has this fire become so politicized? Why has it become a left versus right issue?
Well, I mean, everything becomes a left versus right issue, right? I mean, look, do I think that if tomorrow we had all Republicans in charge, this would flip? Not necessarily, unless they actually fulfilled the promises. I mean, every politician makes promises, but when I ran for governor against Newsom, one of mine was that we were going to build a water pipeline to make sure that our rivers, like the Colorado River especially, were always full of water, so our reservoirs don't go dry. Like the Santa Ynez Reservoir, which is vertically and physically north and up, the Palisades, 117 million gallon reservoir that's bone dry because of a crack in the concrete that politically nobody was able to get around to fix. Which again is sad, and there should be no excuse for, because you have full control of the process. So it blows my mind, because the Palisades were fed with 3 tanks of water, 1 million gallons each. Yeah, there was so much demand which drained those tanks, but they could have been replenished by a reservoir with 117 million gallons, 30 to 40 times the capacity of those tanks. But it was bone dry before this fire because of, again, mismanagement by a political atmosphere. So why does an issue become politicized? Well, I mean, social media helps, but I actually think it's a good thing, because the more politicized this becomes, the more attention comes to the problem, and hopefully it drives change. But mass shootings get politicized too, and then the question is, what ends up happening? Do we ever spend a dime more on mental health?
It worries me that it seems like politicians are really just trying to sling crap at each other.
Of course.
And they're using this as a way to make themselves look better.
Absolutely. I mean, that's like the job of a politician is just to get reelected, in my opinion. I feel like so much of me is like, every politician should only be allowed, forget about term limits. You get 1 term. And then once you're in office, you never have to worry about having another election. Well, now all of a sudden stuff could get done. So Gavin Newsom in 2021, when Biden took over, said, oh, this is great. Biden has taken over. He's on video saying this at a press conference. Biden has taken over. We can now work in coordination with the Biden administration and finally conduct land management, forest management, wildfire prevention work. We could do it all because we're all working in unison. We have a Democratic legislature in California. We've got the Democratic governorship, but now we've got a Democratic Congress and presidency at the federal level. Nothing can stand in our way of solving wildfires in California. Except they did nothing. Except cut the budget for CAL FIRE, for the LA County Fire Department. Because when budget complaints come up, their pet projects don't get killed, like the high-speed rail to nowhere, or homeless prevention, which we spend, $6 for every $1 on homeless prevention that we spend for fires. So again, to clarify that, $6 goes to homelessness, $1 goes to fires. Yet the homeless problem is, people would argue, worse than ever before, but a different topic. So I don't know how you can't blame the existing government. I don't care who they are, Democrats, Green Party, liberals, Republicans. I don't care who it is. Whoever's in office right now sucks. That's my opinion. The fact that, the Department of Water and Power lady earns $751,000 as a salary, $751,000 salary to a tractor from private work, yet can't keep the reservoir filled.
Now, what do you say to people who say that this was simply a perfect storm, where you have brush that broke out after 15 years of a drought, you had 2 years of excessive rain. A lot of shrubbery grew from that. And then you had, after that, another 2 years of drought. A lot of that shrubbery died off. You have a perfect storm of record Santa Ana winds happening at the same time as something sparks up in somebody's backyard, starts a fire that, like, even if the reservoir were filled, a lot of people say that wouldn't have made a difference. That even if we had the water that we needed, when it's moving 5 football fields, what was it? Was it
some amount of football fields per It's crazy.
Those are in the high
fast.
gusts. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And on top of that, also at winds that speed, I heard that you also can't have the air support.
No.
Because they would just go, it would be way too dangerous. And on top of that, you see videos of people with their hoses trying to put out fires. And it's like,
exactly.
It's like, okay,
5 football fields a minute.
At what point can you say, and this is a super unpopular opinion, because it's a nuanced opinion, and people on the left want to point at people on the right, and people on the right want to point at people on the left.
And I have the answer for it.
But at what point can you just be like, look, like this was a crazy calamity, a natural disaster in the same way that Florida has them on occasion. It's like you can't really stop a hurricane that well, I feel like.
Or a massive earthquake.
Or a massive earthquake. It kind of is just something that happens.
Sure.
What do you think?
Well, let's break it down. So California has always had fires for thousands of years, to where plants in California, like California lilacs, manzanitas, these plants have evolved to thrive through fires. That's how we know California has just always been on fire, right? And the way they really work is that the plants expect to burn down. They've evolutionarily, evolved to survive in their root systems, and they sprout back up. And now they can actually flourish because there's no competition for resources on top of now all burned land. It was actually kind of brilliant. These plants is like, yes, burn everything down, kill all my friends and enemies.
They started the fire.
Exactly. Yeah, they start the fire. It's the lilacs. So we know that fires have always occurred. Okay, so what's different? Well, obviously, we're going to talk climate change as well. But one of the things to think about is when fires always happen, what do? Well, they destroy all of the dry brush that's there. And in history, fires have always occurred. They burn the brush, and the fires go away. Well, people don't lose their lives because there are no humans yet at this point, right? Okay, so what's different now? Well, every low wind fire that we have is just a brush fire, and we put it out. So we actually firefight the vast majority of the natural fires that occur that would do the land clearing for us. So now what's happening is all of that unburned fuel, the dead brush that you're talking about, stays all over California because nobody's doing nature's job of the smaller burns, which we, as humans now, we call controlled burns. So, Berkeley, I love using them as a reference. I got into Berkeley. I never went to Berkeley, though. But Berkeley, obviously a left-leaning institution, they are big fans of controlled burns because they work. Low wind days, when you have the water and the staff in place, you pick an area, you torch all the brush, and you burn it all down to the ground. You do what nature used to do naturally.
Where do we practice that? Like in California? And do they just like completely avoid or ignore that in Southern California, like in LA area?
Oh, yeah. It's not, nobody likes controlled burns in their areas because, it's going to affect the air quality. This is why you want to do it on low wind days. They don't fund for it. That's probably the biggest factor, is they don't fund for it because Cal Fire does controlled burns. And we also want to remember that the vast majority of land in California is owned by the federal government, the federal parks. But again, these controlled burns need to happen in the Palisades, but you have to have the political appetite as well to actually do that. And you don't want to go to the Palisades village and, what's that? There's a fire over there. It's a controlled burn. We kind of have to get used to that. But this all leads to your question of why do we have these mega fires? Well, in part, it's because of all the fuel that's there. Yes, California's fire season has gotten longer. California has gotten drier, and the east winds, Santa Ana winds, the Diablo winds, they have gotten stronger over time. So whether we can attribute that to just the natural evolution of climate or human-caused climate change, it could be either of them. We don't know the answer with certainty. But to say that, climate change is absolutely what is making the fires worse confuses that. Well, we have actually interrupted the natural clearing process, and by not clearing out dead brush or doing what the Getty did, we increase the likelihood of worse fires. In fact, you mentioned that your house that was rebuilt was built much better than, before the podcast here, than the 1960s homes because it's built with, stucco or concrete tiles. It's fire hardened. You don't actually build as much brush around them anymore. That is useful. But also what the Getty did is useful. So the Getty's a historic museum. How did they not burn down? Few little things. One, they trimmed their brush so much that they were interviewed and they said the brush that caught fire by the Getty was like rosemary on top of a hot pizza in an oven. It burned and it looked like a large fire, but it was more like a flash. So it burned up and then it was gone. There was no more fuel. The rosemary was burned. They had their shrubs trimmed so far down that when their shrubs caught fire, they basically self-extinguished. There was nothing to catch fire. Their tree canopies were higher. They cleared any of the dead mulch or debris along the floor. And of course, it helps that, firefighters are there as well. who have water, which is why it's important that our fire hydrants work. But all of these things together actually saved the Getty despite those 200-mile-an-hour gusts, which are really bad. You're right. You're not aerial dropping in those winds. Some luck probably plays into that as well. But when you put those things together, it goes, okay, interesting. Maybe we should be conducting controlled burns. Maybe we should pre-deploy firefighters when we're expecting 200-mile-an-hour gusts. And maybe we should crisis test our water infrastructure and actually spend the money to make sure our hydrants don't go empty, that we have backup generators to pump fire hydrants.
How much do you think that would have mattered in this case, though, with the Palisades fire?
A lot. So, look, once you have a massive fire and you've got these 5 football fields, 200-mile winds, yes, obviously, to some extent, there's nothing you can do, right? To some extent, it's a moving inferno. There's nothing you can do. But if every home is built the way you said, fire hardened, and you have fire crews deployed, and you have land that's being irrigated because people have enough water, and it's people are building in drought-tolerant manners, you reduce those risks. So the Getty irrigated all of their landscaping the same morning of the fire. They purposefully drenched everything because they had the availability of water. They were trained in how to prevent a fire from burning down the Getty. And it goes to show that you can prevent, even in those winds, destruction.